It's voting day here in South Korea. After months of political drama that began with a December martial law order, which eventually removed former President Yoon Suk-yeol, the people of South Korea head to polling stations 2 years earlier to pick their 21st president. We go to one of the polling stations with our An Sung-jin standing by. Good morning, Sung-jin.
Good morning, Tommy. Great to be here.
So Sung-jin, after weeks of putting up with the deluge of polling and K-pop campaigning, voters finally get their say today.
Right, Tommy. So I'm currently standing in front of a polling location in Sadangdong in Seoul's Dongjakgu district where voting started from 6 a.m. this morning. I've been out here since the early hours, similar to early voting, where people have been lining in front of the polling station so they can cast their ballot. This election takes place in the first time ever since the COVID-19 pandemic. In the previous election, masks were mandatory and regular voters were separated from those that were under isolation. The polling station that I'm currently at is one of the 14,295 nationwide and 2,260 from Seoul. We already saw the second highest voter turnout rate for early voting, and many have gathered to vote early this morning as well. Have a listen to some of the voters.
Our economy is going through a difficult time right now, so I hope the new president can boost our economy domestically and internationally, and also improve people's livelihoods.
This is my first vote ever, and I'm proud to be participating in it. I would like them to work on making Korea a better country to live in.
Hopes are certainly high in the air. Sung-jin, for our voters out there who are yet to cast their ballot, do remind us the voting process and what voters should be on the lookout for.
So voting takes place from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. today, and voters must be 18 or above and bring a government-issued ID. Unlike early voting, voters only can vote in their registered home address. Which polling station they can vote at can be found on a voting guide delivered to each household or through the National Election Commission website. Anyone who arrives at the polls and stands in line before the polls close have the right to vote. Taking selfies or pictures of the ballots while inside the polling booth is strictly prohibited. That's all I have for now for this glimpse of the polling station in the early hours today, and I will be back for more. Back to you, Dami.
All right, Sung-jin, thank you for the report. We appreciate it. And it's just past 8 a.m. here in South Korea. How many South Korean voters have already cast their ballot in the past 2 hours since polls opened? We now connect with our Yeouido at the National Election Commission. Hello there, Yeouido.
Good morning, Dami.
So, Yeouido, we're still in the early hours of the election day, but how's the turnout looking 2 hours into the voting?
Well, Tommy, so I'm at the National Election Commission in Gwacheon City, where officials are keeping track of the voter turnout. It's been around 2 hours since the polls opened this morning at 6 a.m. The turnout at 8 a.m. was 5.7%, not including figures from early voting. The figures by regions are as of 7 a.m. The highest turnout rate as of 7 a.m. was in Daegu with 3.2%. Jeollanam-do province, which showed the highest early voter turnout rate, is at 1.9%. The lowest turnout is in Gwangju with 1.8%. The capital, Seoul, is seeing a turnout of 2.2%. Incheon is at 2.6%, Busan at 2%, and Daejeon stands at 2.8%. Gyeonggi-do province stands at 2.5%, while Jeollabuk-do province is at 2%. In terms of other provinces, turnout in Chungcheongbuk-do is 2.6%, Chungcheongnam-do 2.7%, Gyeongsang-buk-do 3%, and Gyeongsang-nam-do 2.7%. In this presidential election, early voting was held last week for 2 days, recording a turnout of slightly over 34%, the second highest on record.
I see. Yeouido, so the polls will close at 8 p.m. tonight. That's when vote counting officially begins. Now, when will the results be known then?
Yes, Tommy, once the voting ends at 8 p.m., the ballot boxes will be sealed and taken to counting centers under police escorts. Counting begins soon after, and the National Election Commission expects counting to be finished by around 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. The results should become clear by midnight once 70 to 80% of the votes are counted. However, the final results, of course, may take longer depending on how close the race is and the voter turnout. Once counting is done, the NEC will hold a full committee meeting in which the new president will be formally declared. This meeting is expected to happen between 7 and 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and the process should only take 5 to 10 minutes. The new president's term will immediately begin. On Monday, Do Tae-ak, chairman of the National Election Commission, urged active voter participation, emphasizing the importance of creating a united South Korea through voting. No assured the public that the NEC has prioritized transparency, highlighting measures such as 24-hour CCTV at early voting stations and a vote paper inspection system, both implemented in last year's general election. Authorities are focusing on safety management as well. The National Fire Agency has launched special emergency operations at over 15,000 polling and counting stations nationwide, running until ballot counting ends. Also this morning at 6 a.m., police declared the highest level of emergency alert, mobilizing all available personnel. The heightened readiness will continue until the new president's inauguration is completed and he arrives at his office on Wednesday. Around 60,000 officers are assigned to polling station security, 45,000 to ballot transport, and 7,000 to counting center protection. That's all I have at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates for our later newscast. Back to you, Tommy.
All right, Uni, thank you for that coverage. That was our Uni live from the National Election Commission. Now, presidential hopefuls wrapped up their 22 days of campaigning at locations that are dear to their respective parties. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung held his campaign finale at Seoul's Yeouido Park, calling for an end to insurrection. Our Moon-soo reports.
In the final rally of the 21st presidential race, Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung returned to where it all began, Yeouido, the symbolic heart of the December 3rd martial law protests. Surrounded by a sea of supporters and waves of blue balloons, Lee called on voters to complete what he is calling a revolution of light.
Tomorrow's vote will decide, end the insurrection or continue it, restore livelihoods or destroy them, grow the economy or wreck it.
He accused forces of insurrection of spreading fake news and manipulating public opinion, and said only a decisive voter turnout could prevent their resurgence. Before stepping off stage, Lee and his supporters sang the national anthem through all 4 verses, and he bowed deeply, thanking the crowd. With campaign activity banned on election day, this was Lee's final opportunity to address the public face-to-face. But his campaign didn't end there. After the rally, Lee live-streamed on YouTube to make a final appeal. Sitting alone in front of the camera, he told viewers he was still 3 votes short and urged them to help carry him across the finish line. Over the past 22 days, Lee's campaign traveled over 5,000 kilometers, taking him to 66 rallies with 236,000 people on the trail. His last day of campaigning took him across key battlegrounds in this whole metropolitan area, from Gangbuk to Gangsa, and finally to Seongnam, where he first entered politics.
Your vote is the start of real change, turning despair into hope, division into unity, and stagnation into growth. Trust Lee Jae-myung, a loyal and capable public servant who has always delivered results through action. I'll get the job done.
Lee pledged to order an immediate review of the economic situation upon taking office, placing urgent focus on recovering livelihoods. Striking a tone of inclusion, Lee said he would be a president for all, not just those in blue. Moon-soo, Arirang News.
And on the same day, the People Power Party's Moon-soo staged a nationwide campaign from Jeju Island to the capital Seoul to spend the eve of Election Day at the Grass Plaza in front of Seoul City Hall, now promising reform in governance. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Literally pulling out all the stops on his last day of campaigning, People Power Party Moon-soo travelled across 5 cities in 10 hours. From the southern island of Jeju to the capital of Seoul, the 73-year-old candidate pledged reforming government and his party to meet the call of the times and the demands of the people.
I will push for bold party reforms to achieve internal democracy, a horizontal relationship between the party and the president's non-intervention in party affairs, and a healthy relationship between the party and the government.
Once again, he issued an apology over impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, which has tainted his party by association. As he stopped by Busan for the third time, the conservative stronghold of Daegu and the central city of Daejeon, Kim lashed out against his Democratic Party rival Lee Jae-myung, warning against his style of dictatorial governance, and raised the red flag on Lee's family scandals. Kim stressed that his own wife had never used his corporate card, and that his daughter had never publicly uttered vulgar language like Lee's son allegedly did. As if to prove his point, Kim was joined by his daughter in Daegu and stood on stage with his family at his final rally at Seoul City Hall Square. The PPP candidate also emphasized unity with former rivals from the party primary, including Na Kyung-won and Chol-soo and Han Dong-un, to prevent what he called a dictatorship under Lee Jae-myung. After failing to achieve a united conservative ticket with the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok, Kim called on voters to back him, not Reform's candidate, saying a split vote would only help the DP's Lee Jae-myung win.
I believe tomorrow will be a great day. It will be the day we stop the bulletproof dictatorship and protect the Republic of Korea. A day when this nation can finally blossom.
Kim ended the night meeting citizens in areas bustling with young people, including Hongdae and Central Seoul. Over the 22 days of official campaigning, Kim has travelled more than 7,300 kilometres to hold 157 events. Oh Seung, Arirang News.
And the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok spent the final day of campaigning solidifying his support among young voters. On Monday at Korea Polytechnic University in Gyeonggi-do Province, he joined students for a meal at the school cafeteria, his final lunchtime outreach. He then wrapped up the final day in the conservative stronghold of Daegu City at Suseongli, where he appealed to conservative voters by portraying himself as a new generational leader for the right. Now, regardless of who wins the election, the incoming administration needs to reset South Korea's foreign policy as one of the core national missions, especially after months of a hiatus in diplomacy. But how this is done will vary depending on who actually becomes the next president. Our Kim Jung-sil has more.
Three frontrunners, three different visions for South Korea's role on the global stage. In their final televised debate, the candidates outlined foreign policy agendas that could reshape the country's position in a region facing rapid change. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung called for balance between the U.S. alliance and stable ties with China and Russia. He warned of a diplomatic vacuum since the December 3rd martial law unrest and said South Korea's approach must evolve.
The U.S. alliance is the foundation of our foreign policy. It must be developed practically, inclusively, and with a long-term vision. But we must not neglect ties with China and Russia. They require careful, strategic management.
On North Korea, Lee seems to be charting a different course from past progressive leaders favoring step-by-step engagement over demands for immediate denuclearization. Conservative candidate Moon-soo took a harder line, saying diplomacy must be backed by strength.
Kim Jong-un's dictatorship threatens our lives and property with nuclear weapons and missile provocations. I will build a transparent, principled inter-Korean relationship and strengthen our defenses by reinforcing nuclear deterrence through the U.S. alliance.
At the same time, his team told Arirang News he's open to meeting North Korea's leader while supporting economic and cultural engagement as long as it's grounded in South Korea's constitutional principle of one unified nation. At 40, Lee Jun-seok is the youngest candidate in the race. Last week, he laid out his latest foreign policy vision backed by sweeping institutional reform.
The president of South Korea must have international experience and a practical mindset. If elected, I will merge the unification and foreign ministries and appoint a deputy prime minister for national security to oversee foreign affairs, unification and defense policies.
He said South Korea should lead its alliance and not just rely on it. Three visions for South Korea's future on the world stage. By tonight, one of them will begin to shape it. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
and all eyes are on what the incoming president's first directive will be. Now, their visions for South Korea's diplomacy may differ sharply, but all of the three main runners appear to be on the same page when it comes to bouncing back the country's economy. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
With economic institutions both at home and abroad revising down their growth projections for South Korea, economic pledges are taking center stage in the presidential race.
The domestic economy shrank by 0.2% in the first quarter. Negative growth. How can our people make a living like this? Please elect Lee Jae-myung, a capable, loyal, and well-prepared worker as president.
It's true that Korea is now in a slump with very low growth, among the worst globally, right? I will bring this economy back to life as the president of the economy, everyone.
Half of Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung's pledges focus on the economy, while 7 out of 10 of People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo's are economic pledges. And Lee's top economic pledge and Kim's second is artificial intelligence, signaling how both view it as central to Korea's economic growth. Both propose investing 100 trillion won, or around $71 billion into fostering the AI industry, but their plans of how they'll use these funds differ. Lee Jae-myung's AI for All initiative aims to expand public access by offering free advanced AI services, including a Korean version of ChatGPT, while also pledging to secure over 50,000 high-performance GPUs. Kim plans to set up a public-private fund to foster AI unicorns and vows to train 200,000 young specialists through graduate programs and software-focused universities. But both agree that Korea's regulations are outdated, with Lee calling for special exemptions and Kim pushing to align regulations with global standards. Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok, currently third in the polls, has proposed market-driven AI innovation with minimal state intervention. And another issue that has garnered much attention is each candidate's bid to improve work-life balance.
Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week. Is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes.
He has proposed reducing the standard work week from 40 to 36 hours by cutting Friday afternoons without reducing wages. Kim's plan adds an extra hour per day from Monday to Thursday for a shorter Friday without reducing total hours, and includes exemptions to the 52-hour cap for the semiconductor sector. And Lee Jun-seok, instead of a 4.5-day workweek proposal, has pledged labor reforms that include giving local governments the authority to adjust the minimum wage to revitalize regional economies. Though each candidate's visions differ, their focus on the economy underscores its central role in this election. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea ended 2024 with a botched martial law order and saw yet another South Korean president impeached just this April. And just 60 days later, the country is now on the hunt for a new leader. We recap the last 6 months and what the past half a year has left us with Professor Mason Ricci. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
And also my colleague, Jung-sil. Welcome, Jung-sil.
Glad to be here.
So, Jung-sil, it's been a hectic year for South Korea. Now, it was the December martial law order to begin with that caught the South Korean people and also the entire world off guard, right?
Absolutely, Tommy. As you said, it did begin on the night of December 3rd around 10:30 p.m. when then President Yoon Suk-yeol stunned the nation by declaring martial law in a televised address. He accused the opposition-led National Assembly of paralyzing the government and invoked sweeping emergency powers, banning all political activity and tightening media control. Moments later, troops surrounded the assembly building. But around 1 a.m. on December 4th, 190 lawmakers, including members of Yoon's own party, some scaling the fences to get in, convened inside and unanimously voted to overturn the decree. Martial law was officially lifted just 6 hours after it was declared. Now, Yoon publicly apologized, but the political backlash was overwhelming. On December 14th, the assembly voted to impeach him. He became the first sitting president detained while in office and was eventually indicted on charges of insurrection. The Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment on April 4th, ruling that Yoon had gravely disrupted the democratic order. Now, under South Korean law, a new election must be held within 60 days when a president is removed from office. So the snap presidential vote was set for June 3rd, bringing us to today.
Right, time did fly, but the past 6 months was definitely a challenging time for South Korea. Now, Professor Ricci, this political drama was an experience we certainly didn't need to go through. But do you think South Korea is ready to move forward with this snap presidential election?
I think that your average voter is ready to move on through this election and get past martial law. There are lots of quality of life issues here in South Korea that need to be dealt with, and of course, the world is a fast-moving place, and Korea can't be in sort of suspended animation without an elected president forever. So I think that's the case. On the other hand, I think the political partisans and the political class are probably not ready to move on from martial law. There are still people among the conservatives who I know who essentially think that Yoon Suk-yeol did the right thing, and that they think that the entire impeachment and removal from office was unjust, and the other way around, the Democratic Party, obviously believes that this is something that they can use to capitalize on politically. So I think that's sort of my short answer to that. In essence, December 3rd left scars. And how could it not in a country that has had an authoritarian past? And I don't think that those scars are healed yet. And the job of the president, among other things, should be to unite the people so that indeed they can begin to move past this martial law. I'm not certain that that's going to be the case. Korea has a history of what we call a reactive democracy, where the people respond to infringements on their freedom ever since the democratic movement in the 1980s.
Right.
And really, what needs to move along with that is the political class to move past some of its hang-ups and some of its infighting and polarization, and in essence lead Korea to a place where it can be as institutionally strong in terms of democracy as the people are in terms of reactive democracy when their freedoms are infringed.
Right, takes time to heal, and also we still have pending homework to resolve within the political circle to begin with. Now, Jung-seo, this is the actual election day, but in-person early and overseas voting had already taken place both at home and abroad with high voter turnouts. Now, let's begin with the two-day early voting last week.
Yes, Tommy, South Koreans already showed a strong interest and engagement through early and overseas voting. Early voting at home closed with a turnout of 34.74%. Slightly lower than the 36.93 recorded in the last presidential election. Still, considering this year's early voting took place entirely on weekdays, participation remained strong. Turnout was highest in the liberal southwest, including Jeollanam-do province, while conservative regions such as Daegu and Busan lagged behind in the mid-20s and low 30s. Turnout may have dipped partly because early voting fell on Thursday, Friday this time, unlike the Friday-Saturday schedule in 2022. Now, the National Election Commission introduced hourly updates on voter turnout as well as 24-hour CCTV recording for early ballot boxes, marking a push toward transparency. As for overseas voting, the numbers hit an all-time high with a 79.5% turnout. Ballots were cast in 223 locations across 118 countries, including first-time participants like Lithuania and Luxembourg. All overseas ballots have now been sealed and transported back to Korea, and they will be counted together with domestic votes today.
Right. The high, both early and overseas voter turnouts are raising hopes for the overall higher voter participation this year. Now, Professor Ricci, this is certainly a good sign that more people made sure their votes are being counted. But where do you think these high figures came from?
I think in the first place, this is just a reaction to the martial law. As I said, Korea has a history of a sort of reactive, popular democracy, and clearly people are exercised about the martial law declaration, which has really, I think, motivated people to come out and vote and to reassert popular sovereignty. In the second place, you have two highly polarizing candidates. especially Jae-myung, is highly polarizing. Kim Moon-soo is in his own way polarizing and has become, I would say, increasingly so within the last part of his career, especially as he has been increasingly associated with the hard right here in Korea. So you have two polarizing candidates coming, of course, out of an incredibly polarizing moment, the martial law declaration. And so I think that the high voter turnout, as much as anything else, is a sign that people are both motivated to reassert their popular sovereignty while also voting in many instances, frankly speaking, probably to hope to obviate the election of a candidate that they fear. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who are going to vote for Lee Jae-myung because they fear the authoritarian or perceived authoritarian tendencies of the right here in Korea. And there are a lot of people who are conservatives who think that Lee Jae-myung is a monstrous dictator and they want to prevent him from becoming president. And so in some sense, both sides are also perhaps motivated by fear as much as anything else.
Definitely. Jung-seo, ahead of the election day today, now the presidential hopefuls had a roughly 3 weeks of campaigning. Now, that wasn't also a smooth ride, was it?
Exactly, Tommy. The campaign period, which started on May 12th, was anything but smooth, especially for the ruling People Power Party. Now, in a dramatic overnight shakeup, the party leadership tried to replace its nominee, Kim Moon-soo, with former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, with just 1 day before registration closed. Kim called it a political coup and filed legal action. Hours later, an internal vote rejected the switch and Kim was reinstated. He also pursued a last-minute unity deal with Lee Jun-seok of the New Reform Party throughout the campaign, but that too failed. He firmly rejected the merger, calling it regressive and a step backward for conservative reform. Lee Jae-myung, meanwhile, stuck to his message, promising to bring an end to the 6 months of political chaos triggered by martial law.
Right, the failure to form a merger within the conservative bloc was another drama within the whole political drama.
Absolutely.
Now, Professor Ritchie, do you think all that hassle and the failure to form a merger within the conservative bloc had any impact on this snap election or not as much? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think that conservatives probably are going to come out and mostly vote conservative. I don't think that they necessarily will be held up from voting for Kim Moon-soo because of the drama that happened. But I do think perhaps moderates who might otherwise have feared Lee Jae-myung might actually choose to vote for Lee Jun-seok, or perhaps will in fact vote for Lee Jae-myung, or perhaps in some cases won't vote. I think that's a relatively small number, but that might be the case. Because the PPP sort of called into question their competence as a party. Through the way that they organized their party primary system. The whole thing was kind of a cock-up from the beginning. I remember talking with experts when I was hearing what was beginning to happen with this idea of having a primary and then essentially have that candidate be replaced by Han Duck-soo.
Right.
That was, for many people, considered strange and a little bit incomprehensible. And then, of course, the fact that it didn't go through afterwards and led to this sort of party coup or candidate coup on the night of May 9th into May 10th. Frankly speaking, for some people might have sort of recalled a sort of authoritarian tendencies of the right, which we saw on December 3rd. So it made it harder for the party to move away from this label of somehow being involved in a sort of an authoritarian way of governing, which in turn hurt the party's ability to really make it stick to Lee Jae-myung as being a party authoritarian, which was one of the things that they sort of campaigned on. So I do think that it actually hurt them. I don't think that they handled this very competently. They didn't turn the page very well on December 3rd. And I think all of those things probably hurt them to some extent. That being said, I think ultimately this election has been, from the very beginning, a referendum on December 3rd. And to some degree, a lot of the cake was already baked simply by what happened on that day and in the period that follows. So the actual campaign itself, I think, was going to always be a very difficult and uphill battle for the PPP. We'll see whether or not they manage to get over the hump. But it's been a difficult ride, not only because of December 3rd, but also the way they handled the campaign, frankly.
Indeed, indeed. That's why it'll be interesting to see which candidate the swing voters and the centrists will actually bet on today. And also, Jung-seo, to be exact, the presidential hopefuls had exactly 22 days of campaigning. Now, how did they make the most out of the campaign period?
Well, some of the things that stood out to me was I would like to mention the Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung, who ran a high-security campaign unlike anything we've ever seen in South Korea. He wore a bulletproof vest and stood behind ballistic glass, marking the first time in Korea's electoral history that a major candidate campaigned in such visible protective gear. His team cited credible threats, including reports of smuggled firearms. It also comes just over a year after Lee survived a knife attack while campaigning in Busan, adding to the charged atmosphere around this election. Moon-soo of People Power Party spent the final stretch of his campaign slamming Lee, repeatedly referencing his ongoing legal battles. Lee Jun-seok of Reform Party, meanwhile, hit college campuses using student cafeterias as a backdrop to rally young voters behind his call for a generational change.
Jung-sil, campaigning with a bulletproof jacket shows how much South Korea is exposed to deeper polarization. And now, Professor Richie, I have to return to you for the ultimate question. Do you think South Korea is ready to, conquer that political polarization through this now presidential election?
That's a very difficult question.
That's why I'm asking you.
To go back to my initial response, I think that your average voter is willing to do that, and in fact, expecting and sees a responsibility for the president to do that. I am not confident that their expectations won't be disappointed, unfortunately. That being said, I think I would say ultimately, the responsibility to overcome polarization lies with the people themselves. In democracies, people get the government they deserve, as the saying goes. And in this regard, I think that it's up to the South Korean voting public to inform themselves better about politics, to be less taken in by both on the left and the right conspiracy theories, fear-mongering, politically polarizing discourse, and to essentially to gather facts in a way that's sound, put them together in a way that's coherent and logical, and come to conclusions based off of policy preferences rather than personalities and conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. That's a high bar, but that's the bar that democracy sets. And so we'll see whether or not the Korean voting public is capable of doing that. The political candidates and the one who becomes president will have a responsibility to try to unite the population. They can certainly make things worse. I doubt that whoever wins will by themselves be able to make things better. And we'll ultimately see again during the next presidential campaign, which hopefully will not be a snap election, but will be held in regular democratic order, whether Korea's democracy can fully recover from the martial law episode and its aftermath.
Whether liberal or conservative, South Korea and the people of South Korea are ready to welcome a new administration. Professor Richie, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Jung-sil, thank you for that thorough wrap-up.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
요새 쉬었음 청년들이 굉장히 사회 문제로 대두되고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 해결이 가장 먼저 이루어져야 될 거라고 생각합니다.
저는 일단 각자가 말하는 정책에 대해서 집중하고 그래도 5년이라는 길다면 길고 짧다면 짧은 시간 동안 본인이 말하는 거에 대해서 잘 지켜가는 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
기후와 관련해서는 조금 더 재생에너지나 이런 쪽에 조금 더 관심을 가지고 탈원전 정책에 조금 더 관심을 가지는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
대학 서열화를 끝내고 그리고 사교육 시장을 줄이는 방향으로 좀 더 평등한 교육 정책을 위해서 애써야 되지 않나 이런 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
누가 돼도 상관은 없지만 공약을 하셨더라면 하나라도 지켜주는 게 있었으면 좋겠어요. 아무래도 자영업 쪽에 있다 보니까 자영업자 쪽에 조금 더 신경을 써줬으면 좋을 것 같아요.
일단 기본적으로 주거 안정이 좀 제대로 이루어졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
없는 분들을 좀 생각해서 서로가 나눔의 실천을 했으면 좋겠어요.
아무래도 제가 이제 30대 초반이다 보니까 이제 결혼 이런 관련해서 정책들이 물론 지금도 잘 나오고 있는 것 같은데 아직도 청년들이 좀 결혼을 준비하는 데 있어서 어려움을 겪고 있기 때문에 결혼 문제에 있어서 좀 이제 정책 같은 것도 좀 더 많이 완화되고 대출 규제라든지 이런 것들 많이 좀 풀어졌으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 있습니다.
Now that brings an end to our special on this election day. Arirang News will continue to follow up on the election throughout the day. We'll be back later at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.